You think you know someone? Until they look you dead in the eye and threaten to call the cops on you in the house you paid for. That's not just disrespect. That's a full-blown declaration of emotional war. And the worst part? It came from my own daughter. If you've ever felt like you gave everything, money, love, patience, and got betrayal, abandonment, and humiliation in return, then this story is for you. Because what happened next wasn't revenge. It was strategy, and it changed my life. And let me tell you something up front. Walking out that door wasn't weakness. It was the beginning of my comeback. Quiet, powerful, and smarter than they ever expected. When people treat you like you're disposable, the smartest thing you can do is prove them wrong. So grab a cup of tea and get comfortable, because you're about to hear how I turned emotional abuse and a desperate eviction threat into the most empowering move I ever made. Before we dive into this story, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell. That way, you won't miss the next episode that could just change the way you look at life and family. It wasn't the kind of silence that soothes your soul. It was the kind that hums beneath your skin, slow and suffocating. Gloria Ann Whitmore, 76, had lived in that house for over 40 years. She raised her daughter there, lost her husband there, and watched the seasons change through the same kitchen window for decades. But lately, the walls felt colder. The place didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a cage made of emotional abuse and unspoken tension. When her daughter Vanessa moved back in with her husband Brad, they claimed it was temporary, just until they got their finances in order. Gloria didn't argue. She understood that sometimes life throws curveballs, but it wasn't long before she noticed subtle shifts. Vanessa started taking over decisions around the house, like what groceries to buy or who was allowed to visit. Brad stayed quiet most of the time, like a shadow with no spine. Disrespect began dripping through the walls like a slow leak. Little things added up. Vanessa would roll her eyes whenever Gloria spoke, dismissing her opinions with sarcasm masked as jokes. At first, it was just in private, but then, in front of guests, she called her mother a freeloader and a deadweight. Gloria felt the sting, not because of the words, but because of the betrayal coming from her own flesh and blood. Money was always a sore topic, and Gloria started sensing that greed was the real guest living under her roof. Even though she technically owned the house, Vanessa made it feel like Gloria was just renting space in her own life. Her bedroom, the one she'd shared with her late husband, felt smaller, colder. Brad didn't say much, but his silence was a choice. That passive agreement only deepened the sense of abandonment Gloria felt. And when she heard her daughter whispering about taking care of things legally, her gut told her this wasn't just about financial struggles. It was about power. Gloria didn't cry, though. She brewed her tea each morning just like always, stirring it with the same silver spoon she'd had since 1979. But her mind was sharper than her family gave her credit for. She'd survived grief, loneliness, and wartime shortages. And what she felt now, it wasn't fear. It was a slow-burning awareness. Something was brewing behind the scenes, and she was starting to sense that the real threat wasn't just emotional abuse, but a plan involving money, deception, and maybe even a quiet attempt at eviction. There's something cruel about being insulted in your own home, and worse, by your own child. Vanessa didn't shout, at least not at first. No, her weapon of choice was humiliation, wrapped in passive-aggressive comments. "You should be grateful we let you stay here, Mom," she'd say, knowing full well the house still had Gloria's name on the deed. At dinner, she'd mock Gloria's old ways, her taste in clothes, even how she handled money. It wasn't about joking. It was about control. Vanessa's tone shifted from teasing to toxic. "You're just sitting around all day like a parasite," she snapped one evening, loud enough for Brad and their friends to hear. No one stood up for Gloria, not even Brad, who just looked down at his plate like the mashed potatoes held all the answers. The emotional abuse was no longer subtle. It was sharp, deliberate, and more frequent. Being called a burden in front of strangers? That's not care. That's abandonment in plain sight. Gloria started noticing how much Vanessa talked about expenses, as if her mother were a line item to be cut from the budget. "Do you know how much you cost us?" she sneered once, and that's when it hit Gloria. Her daughter didn't see her as family anymore. She saw her as a financial liability. The disrespect wasn't just emotional. It was economic, and that kind of betrayal, dressed as frustration, has a special kind of sting. Some days Vanessa would stand in the hallway, arms crossed, like she was daring Gloria to speak. Other days, she simply acted like Gloria wasn't there. Brad followed her lead. He wasn't abusive with words, but his silence was louder than anything. There were mornings when Gloria would make coffee, only to find her mug moved, her space ignored. These weren't accidents. They were power plays, a soft kind of threat, one that built up day by day. Still, Gloria didn't lash out. She watched. She learned. She tucked away every word, every glance, every slip. Her heart ached, but her mind was ticking. And when she overheard Vanessa on the phone, talking about changing the documents and handling the deed, something clicked. This wasn't just cruelty anymore. It was calculated. And if there was one thing Gloria had learned over the years, it's that people who act out of greed often make mistakes when they think no one's paying attention. The smell of betrayal is subtle, like something just slightly off in the air. Gloria had been sensing it for weeks, but nothing could have prepared her for what she found tucked inside Vanessa's purse. One morning while helping her look for car keys, a folder, inside copies of property transfer documents. Her name was still there, but barely. It looked like someone had tried to forge her signature, sloppy enough to insult her intelligence. That was the moment greed stopped hiding and showed its full face. She held the papers like they were on fire, her fingers trembling, but not with fear, with clarity. Vanessa wasn't just being disrespectful. She was plotting to erase Gloria entirely. From the house, from the finances, from her own life. Brad's name had been added as co-owner. Gloria felt a deep, aching nausea, not from surprise, but from the confirmation. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was abuse with a legal twist, a theft in slow motion, disguised as family planning. What hurt more than the documents was the realization that her daughter saw property as more valuable than her mother. Gloria remembered saving every penny with her late husband to buy that house, fixing leaky pipes, repainting the porch, even skipping vacations to pay the mortgage. And now, Vanessa was ready to throw it all away. Like it meant nothing, all for the promise of a bigger bedroom, or maybe a renovation loan she didn't deserve. That's not just betrayal. That's a full-blown moral bankruptcy. Gloria didn't confront her right away. She needed to breathe. She sat alone in the backyard, tea in hand, staring at the bird feeder her husband had built. She thought about everything: abandonment, emotional abuse, the silent threats. And she knew one thing for sure. The next step couldn't be emotional. It had to be strategic, because people like Vanessa don't respond to tears. They only react to consequences. And if there was going to be a reckoning, Gloria needed to be ready. And so, when Vanessa walked out that evening, dressed up for dinner and laughing like the house already belonged to her, Gloria smiled politely. She said nothing, but deep down, a plan was beginning to take shape. Something quiet, something smart, a way to reclaim not just her home, but her dignity. Because the only thing worse than being betrayed is being underestimated by someone who forgot what you're capable of. It was a quiet Thursday morning when Gloria finally decided to speak up. The sun was barely rising, casting soft light over the kitchen table where she laid out the forged documents, like a deck of dirty cards. When Vanessa walked in, sipping her overpriced oat milk latte, Gloria didn't raise her voice. "Care to explain this?" she asked, calm but firm, tapping her finger on the fake signature. For a split second, Vanessa froze, and then came the threats. "You're delusional," Vanessa scoffed. "That's none of your business." Her face flushed red, not with guilt, but with the rage of someone caught. "If you don't back off, I swear I'll call the cops. You don't even own this place anymore." That last part was a bluff, and they both knew it. But the fact that she was willing to weaponize the law, twist it into a tool of abuse, shook Gloria to the core. This wasn't just a fight over money. It was a battle for her very existence. Brad walked in halfway through the storm, scratching his head like it was too early for drama. When Gloria tried to show him the papers, he didn't even look. "Just let it go, Gloria," he mumbled. That was the nail in the coffin. Not only was she being gaslit by her daughter, but now her own son-in-law was siding with a lie. The disrespect was complete. This was no longer a misunderstanding. It was an open betrayal, backed by silence and sealed with emotional abandonment. But Gloria didn't scream. She didn't cry. She looked at her daughter with the kind of stare that only years of injustice can carve into a soul. "If I'm such a burden," she whispered, "then maybe it's time I stopped being one." Vanessa laughed, but it was shaky. That was the first time Gloria saw it. Fear. Not because of what Gloria would do, but because of what she might already know. Power was shifting. Slowly, but surely, and Vanessa could feel it. Later that night, when the house was quiet and everyone assumed she'd surrendered, Gloria sat at her desk and opened her old notebook, the one she used back when she managed the family's finances like a small business. With hands steady as steel, she began writing a letter, not of apology, not of rage, but of movement. Something inside her had changed, and while they slept peacefully, Gloria was already one step ahead. The next morning, the house was still asleep when Gloria quietly zipped up a small navy suitcase. No loud goodbyes, no dramatic scenes, just a folded nightgown, a worn Bible, a photo of her husband, and an envelope containing every legal document that still proved, without question, that she was the rightful owner of the house. She left her room spotless, like someone checking out of a hotel. On the kitchen counter, she placed a single note. "Don't worry about me. I'm safe." And thinking clearly now, she booked a room at a modest motel on the other side of town. Nothing fancy, just a place with clean sheets and peace. The kind of peace that doesn't come from silence, but from freedom. She sat by the window with a cup of black coffee, thinking not of revenge, but of justice. Not of confrontation, but of strategy. After decades of managing bills, saving every dollar, and surviving more storms than she could count, Gloria knew this wasn't the end. It was the reboot. She pulled out her old planner, one she hadn't touched since her husband passed. Inside were names, numbers, and most importantly, connections. People forget that older folks know people, and Gloria still had one. Thomas Redding, her late husband's best friend, and a sharp, no-nonsense attorney who once helped them buy the house in the first place. She called him, calmly, explained the abuse, the deception, the threat of eviction. "I need help," she said, "but I also need this done smart." Thomas didn't waste time. "Come by my office first thing tomorrow," he replied. Gloria smiled. That's the thing about having lived long. You stop panicking. You start calculating. And while Vanessa was probably bragging over brunch about taking control of the house, her mother was already putting pieces in motion. This wasn't about winning an argument. It was about reclaiming her space, her identity, and her dignity, one quiet step at a time. That night, under the dim motel light, Gloria flipped through old photos and financial notes. She thought about everything. The money stolen, the abandonment masked as care, the emotional abuse wrapped in guilt. But she wasn't bitter, just focused. "They thought I was weak because I didn't fight back," she whispered. But what they didn't see is that I was getting ready to move the board. Thomas Redding hadn't aged a day in his voice. When Gloria walked into his downtown office, she was greeted with that same firm handshake and honest stare that had once helped her and her late husband secure the house decades ago. "You've still got fire in your eyes, Gloria," he said, pulling out a legal pad. She laid out the story: abuse, betrayal, the attempted theft, and the quiet plan she had begun. Thomas didn't flinch. "Let's make this right," he said. And just like that, the game began. Thomas reviewed the deed, the forged papers, and confirmed what Gloria already knew. She was still the legal owner. Vanessa's little stunt had no legal weight. But Thomas warned, people desperate for money do reckless things. You'll need more than legal footing. You'll need a clean exit plan. Gloria nodded. She'd already started thinking about the next step, not just getting her house back, but letting it go, on her terms, and with intelligence. That same afternoon, Gloria walked 3 blocks to a local real estate agency, where a bright-eyed agent named Madison Tran welcomed her. Madison had the kind of energy that made people trust her. Within minutes, Gloria didn't waste time with small talk. "I'm selling a home. I want it quiet, fast, and clean." Madison blinked, surprised. "Are you sure?" Gloria's answer was a slow sip of tea from her thermos. "I've never been more sure. My freedom's not for sale. But my house is." Madison took the listing with care, noting every detail Gloria provided. The house still had value. Good location, solid structure, recent upgrades Vanessa had demanded but never paid for. "We'll price it to move," Madison said. Gloria smiled. This wasn't just about finances. It was about taking back power, rewriting the narrative. Vanessa thought she was stealing something, but Gloria was about to flip the script and sell it instead. Back at the motel that night, Gloria felt something she hadn't felt in years. Control. She wasn't running. She was advancing. Every call she made, every signature she placed, was a step away from abandonment and toward empowerment. And as she turned out the light, she whispered to herself, "Tomorrow, I change everything." The listing went live on a Wednesday morning. By lunchtime, Madison had already texted Gloria, "You won't believe this. We've got 3 offers already." Gloria raised an eyebrow, sipping her chamomile tea like she'd been expecting it all along. In a city like theirs, houses didn't stay on the market long, but even she hadn't imagined this kind of interest, especially for a place still full of secrets, emotional scars, and the echo of betrayal in every corner. One of the buyers, a young couple looking to escape the chaos of city rent, made a clean cash offer. No contingencies, no drawn-out inspections. Just a family trying to build something honest. "Let's go with them," Gloria said, almost without hesitation. Madison paused. "That fast?" Gloria just nodded. The faster the cut, the quicker the healing. It wasn't just a financial decision. It was a spiritual one, a clean break from abuse, disrespect, and everything that had been draining her soul. As Madison finalized the paperwork, Gloria felt a weight lift. Not from her shoulders, but from somewhere deeper. Selling the house wasn't about letting go of the past. It was about reclaiming her future. Every box she'd packed, every document she'd signed, was a quiet act of revenge, but not the kind that screamed, the kind that smiled, the kind that walked away richer, not just in money, but in peace. Meanwhile, across town, Vanessa had no idea what was coming. She was still throwing brunch parties, using Gloria's old silverware, laughing too loudly in a home that wasn't hers. Brad stayed quiet, as usual, but neither of them noticed the subtle shift. The mail that had stopped coming, the utilities Gloria had slowly redirected. She wasn't being petty. She was being precise, and precision, Gloria knew, was the most elegant form of justice. The papers were signed, the deposit wired, and just like that, Gloria had not only escaped the storm, she had sold the umbrella, and as she walked out of Madison's office, keys in hand, she said to herself with a small grin, "Let's see what Vanessa does when she finds out who really got evicted." The letter came in a plain white envelope. Vanessa opened it casually, probably expecting another bill. Instead, she found a formal notice of eviction and the name of a new owner she didn't recognize. For a moment, she laughed, thinking it was some kind of clerical error. But when she reread it and then read it again, her stomach dropped. The house had been sold, legally, completely, and there was nothing she could do about it. Money, her favorite weapon, had turned on her. She stormed through the house like a hurricane, shouting Brad's name, demanding explanations that didn't exist. "This is impossible," she kept yelling, but deep down, she knew Gloria had done it, quietly, efficiently, with the kind of intelligence Vanessa had always underestimated. Brad just stood there staring at the eviction notice. "She played you," he muttered. Vanessa's face turned crimson, not from anger, but from humiliation. And for the first time, she realized her mother had outsmarted her. Desperate, Vanessa tried to call Gloria. Once, twice, then over 20 times. No answer. She left voicemails that swung between sobbing apologies and threats soaked in panic. "You can't do this to me," she screamed into the phone. But of course, she could, and she had. Every call rang unanswered. Every message fell into silence. Gloria had moved on, not just physically, but emotionally. She was done being the victim. Now she was in control. Vanessa even tried going to the real estate office, demanding to undo the deal. Madison just blinked. "The house was legally sold. You'll need to vacate within 30 days. No loopholes, no pity. Just justice, served cold." Back at home, Vanessa began to unravel. She tore through drawers, ripped down photos, like destroying the past could somehow rewrite it. Brad, meanwhile, started sleeping on the couch, and eventually stopped coming home at all. One night, alone in the kitchen, Vanessa whispered, "How did she do this?" The woman she had once called weak had flipped the script with surgical precision, and now Vanessa was left with nothing but the echo of her own greed, bouncing off empty walls. But Gloria was already on the other side of town, settling into something better, something clean, something hers. The apartment wasn't huge, but it had sunlight pouring through the windows, and the smell of fresh paint, a smell that meant new beginnings. Gloria stood in the middle of the living room, looking around at the open space. The quiet, the safety, no yelling, no guilt trips, just peace. She dropped her suitcase by the door and exhaled deeply. The money from the house sale had bought her more than a home. It bought her freedom. She furnished the place slowly, intentionally, no rush. Just pieces that made her smile. A teal armchair, a bookshelf for her favorite novels, and a coffee maker that actually worked. Gloria even bought a small plant, naming it Walter, just for the humor of it. It felt good to laugh again. With each choice, she was rebuilding not just her life, but her sense of self. There was no more room for abuse, manipulation, or emotional debt. Back at her old house, Vanessa was spiraling. And Brad? Well, Brad finally packed his things and left. Maybe the tension was too much. Maybe he saw who Vanessa really was when the money ran out, and the lies unraveled. Either way, Gloria heard through a neighbor that the couple had split. And honestly, she didn't feel vindictive, just relieved. Some things fall apart so better things can take their place. That's not revenge. That's just alignment. She spent her mornings reading, sometimes biographies, sometimes financial guides. Gloria believed that even at 76, you never stop learning. Rich Dad, Poor Dad made her laugh. The psychology of money made her think. And each chapter reminded her that knowledge is power, and power, when used with grace, is the best form of quiet empowerment. Gloria wasn't just healing. She was thriving, and every now and then, she'd walk by the mirror and catch her reflection. Not tired, not broken, but whole, strong, radiating something deeper than joy, something like justice fulfilled. But as she sipped her tea and settled into her teal armchair one cloudy afternoon, a knock echoed at the door. She didn't flinch. She already knew who it was. When Gloria opened the door, there stood Vanessa, disheveled, teary-eyed, and holding nothing but a handbag that looked too expensive for someone who had just been evicted. "Please, Mom," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I have nowhere to go." But Gloria didn't move aside. She just looked at her daughter, really looked at her. The same eyes that once looked up at her with innocence now carried desperation, but not repentance. And Gloria had learned to tell the difference. "I need your help," Vanessa said, stepping closer. But Gloria remained still, calm. Her heart wasn't cold. It was just finally protected. "You didn't need me when you had the house. You didn't need me when you were stealing my name, my dignity, my peace," she said, her voice steady. "Now you want my couch?" There was no sarcasm, just truth, painfully honest. and behind it, decades of abandonment, emotional abuse, and silent endurance. Vanessa tried to cry harder, maybe hoping to trigger guilt. But guilt had long since turned into wisdom. "I taught you to be better," Gloria continued. "But I can't keep losing myself trying to save someone who only sees my worth when they've lost everything." Vanessa's lip quivered. "So that's it," Gloria nodded once. "That's justice. That's boundaries. That's me choosing respect. Mine, not yours." She gently closed the door, not slamming it, not locking it with fury. Just closed it, and that click echoed louder than any argument. Gloria walked back to her teal chair, poured the rest of her tea, and opened a book on financial independence she'd borrowed from the library. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She simply felt whole. Because sometimes saying no is the loudest kind of empowerment a person can express. Outside, Vanessa stood frozen for a few more seconds, realizing that for the first time, she couldn't manipulate her way back in. And inside, Gloria turned the page, whispering to herself, "Some lessons take a lifetime to teach." And as she read on, the world outside grew quiet. But inside, for Gloria, everything finally made sense. You know, looking back, I didn't lose a home. I gained my freedom. And maybe that's the point. Sometimes life pushes you out so you can finally walk into something better. Now I want to ask you, what would you do if the people closest to you turned into your biggest threat? How long would you stay silent before taking control of your own story? And more importantly, how much of your dignity are you still giving to people who never deserved it? Let this story be a reminder. Your silence doesn't mean you're weak. Sometimes it means you're preparing. And when the moment comes, move smart, not loud. If this episode moved something inside you, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I read every single one, and it warms my heart to see how far these stories travel.